Welcome to the Fort Detrick Business Development Office webinar series, where the Fort Detrick Business Development Office presents today's webinar, GSA Schedules, Risks and Rewards, which is taught by Hope Lane, CPA with Aronson, LLC. My name is Gloria Larkin, and I am with Target Gov. We are presenting this webinar in conjunction with the Fort Detrick Business Development Office. I'd like to welcome our representative business development specialist, Steve Lamberson.
Hi, Gloria. Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. We're very excited about today's topic and our subject matter expert. I'd like to go through a few housekeeping notes before we introduce our expert, though. We want you to know that we are recording this webinar to make it available to you for future access 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, whenever it's convenient for you. And so that folks can send in questions by email after it's recorded and at any time during today's webinar. If you have questions, we want you to send them directly in by email. You will see the email address on every slide, and right now you see it at the bottom of the slide, ask@fdbdo.com. Whenever you think of a question regarding today's session, you can shoot us off an email, and we will address questions at the end of today's webinar, and we will also reply to them if you're listening to this as a recording for the total future, right, Steve? We're going to answer them whenever the questions are sent in.
That's right.
Okay. I wanted to introduce our subject matter expert today. Hope Lane is a CPA who leads Aronson LLC's Government Contract Services Group with over 20 years of broad-based experience in the government contracting arena. She earned her Bachelor of Science degree in accounting from the University of North Carolina and is responsible for assisting clients in all areas of government contracting related financial compliance and contract administration. With an exclusive focus on government contracting, Ms. Lane possesses an in-depth understanding and intensive hands-on experience. She has served in financial management positions with several regional federal contractors and has extensive experience in the management of all accounting and finance functions. Hope is actively involved in the National Contract Management Association and the Professional Services Council. Welcome, Hope. We're very happy to have you here today.
It is my pleasure to be with this audience today. Thank you.
Would like to turn the webinar over to you.
Fantastic. Okay, today's program is an introduction to the GSA Schedules program. For those of you who are not aware of what a GSA schedule contract is, it's a long-term government-wide contract that provides commercial products and services at pre-negotiated prices. It's essentially like establishing a catalog price with the federal government. It is what's called an IDIQ GWAC, which is an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract, which means you don't know how much anyone's going to buy or at what point they're going to buy. A GWAC is a government-wide acquisition contract, meaning anyone within the federal government can place an order. It's in continuous open season. That means a solicitation is available at all times upon which you can submit a proposal in order to get a contract. It's evergreen, which means it's long-term. It has a 5-year base period and then may have up to 3 5-year option periods with a potential contract life of 20 years. There are no guarantees in life, though. Like many other contracts, it is purely a hunting license, but it can be invaluable if you are talking with a federal customer that has money, has a need that you can address, and they want to know, how can I get to you? You can say, I have a GSA schedule contract. So why are GSA schedules such an important tool, especially in this upcoming period of austerity that we're going to be going through as government contractors? Well, one of the reasons why is GSA schedules are one of the largest procurement programs within the federal government. GSA Schedule Sales for the government fiscal year that ended 2011 were nearly $40 billion. That's with a B. So it's a significant buying group. It is preferred method for buying by many federal agencies. Obtaining a GSA schedule contract allows companies to sell products and services with relative ease, at least in terms of government procurement. And it's also usually the easiest entry point for either commercial companies entering the federal space or for smaller companies that are becoming a prime contractor for the first time. It is one of the few government acquisition endeavors that actually is a benefit to everyone. It benefits government contractors, it benefits the federal government, and it also benefits all of us that are taxpayers because it actually creates efficiencies. So what are some of the advantages to the federal buying agency? Why have they latched on to this and really adopted it as one of their preferred methods? Well, the biggest reason is it saves time. Everywhere you look, they talk about how we don't have enough government procurement officials. Contracting officers are overwhelmed with the volume of purchases that they're making. Well, anything that saves time, they're going to. So streamlining. It allows contracting officers to buy goods and services without going through what's called the traditional negotiated procurement cycle. That cycle generally takes about 270 days on average to go from the time you have to announce that you have a need to the time that you're awarding the contract. Whereas a GSA schedule task order competition may be accomplished in as little as 5 days, or for a more extensive one, maybe up to 30 days. So there's significant time saving. In addition, contracting officers can actually do a procurement without actually having to announce it to the entire world. Traditional negotiated procurement requires that they have to do an announcement called a synopsis that they have a need. That is eliminated to a more limited audience for GSA schedules. Anytime that you save time, you save money. So the administrative costs internally are shorter. It's easier to access millions of customers through GSA Advantage website, which is where all GSA schedule contractors are listed. It's flexible and easy to use, and it provides online proposal and procurement tools that we're going to be talking about later, the biggest of which is called eBuy. So there's always a cost savings when you save time. So that's the biggest reason why agencies like it. Now, why would you, GSA schedule contractor, like it? Well, it has pre-negotiated rates. You don't have, whenever you're talking to a federal customer, you don't have to go through an extensive negotiation every single time. You don't have to prepare a full-blown proposal every single time you're trying to sell to a customer. You've already done that once. You have an established catalog price that you can now use, and now you're going to actually use those negotiated rates when you actually bid on a task order opportunity. It's available across the government and by actually state and local governments as well under certain circumstances that we'll discuss. It offers a competitive advantage over non-GSA schedule holders. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten calls from companies who say, I want to be able to participate in this buying opportunity that's coming up, but it's going to be available only to GSA schedule holders. How can I get on a schedule in the next 30, 45, 60 days? Well, it's nearly impossible. So you really have to think further ahead and get those contracts in place, because it's not something that you can get in place instantaneously. So that's one of the competitive advantages. It is incredibly flexible to the contractor as well. It kind of operates very differently than any other contract, because at any time you can add additional capabilities, add additional labor categories. You have ability to increase your rates at preset times, which is very different from any other government contract. It also allows you to team up with other GSA schedule holders where both of you have privity, or all of you have privity of contract, rather than having to establish the kind of hierarchical prime-sub relationships. It's also easy to use online marketing tools that are available to you. GSA invests a lot of money in trying to promote the schedules environment to their government customers, and therefore the government contractors who hold those schedules get to take advantage of those. So why are GSA schedules important? It's mostly because this is where the money's going. As I said, GSA schedule sales continue to go up. Last year, again, like I said, I think it was $39.2 billion that was sold under GSA schedules. Some of the more significant contracts, because there are more than 30 different GSA schedule contracts, and they're divided depending on the type of product or services that are covered. But there are 5 contracts that are currently having sales over $1 billion a year. The IT Schedule 70, which many of you may have heard of, is always going to be the grandfather of all the contracts. GSA schedule sales are it's probably about $15.5 billion last year. Very closely and well established behind that is what's called the MOBIS contract. This is the classic management consulting contract. It had more than $5 billion in sales last year. Now, both of these contracts are widely recognized and widely used across all aspects of the federal government. Then we start getting into some of the more specialized service areas. The next one is the PES contract. This is the Professional Engineering Services contract. It is highly used. As you see, it probably has about $3 billion in sales last year, though there tend to be a much smaller number of contractors on this contract, but the dollar value of the orders, because of the nature of the engineering projects, tend to be very high. Many of the projects going through engineering are over $1 million apiece. The law enforcement schedule has really gained in sales volume over the last 3 years. A lot of this has to do with some of the war efforts that we have going on. There's a wide variety of product and services under this contract that are all geared towards either law enforcement or homeland security. Security consulting services has been one of the security consulting services, and body armor have been among the 2 top sellers on this contract for the last 5 years. The last one that kind of rounds out the $1 billion a year contracts is the FABS contract, and this is Financial and Business Solutions. There's been a great emphasis on auditing and financial compliance within the government itself, and this is where a lot of those financial audits are happening. Again, a much smaller subset of government contractors holding this contract with a concentration of dollar value of task orders. Now, I've only highlighted the $5 billion a year schedules. Like I said, there are about 20 or 25 or 27 other GSA schedule contracts that cover a variety of products or services. GSA schedules are available to more than just the federal government. It is government-wide, so anyone in the federal government can purchase, but there's also a rather extensive list of agencies that are eligible to purchase from GSA, mentioned here in this slide. It also includes some well-known non-traditional or quasi-governmental agencies, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, the Red Cross, the Washington Metro Area Transit Authority, so forth. So, in addition to that, the D.C. government also is able to purchase. And then there are selected schedules that have capacity for GSA state and local governments to purchase. Specifically, the IT Schedule 70 and the Law Enforcement Schedule 84 across the board can be used by state and local governments, tribal organizations, and school districts. and any of the GSA schedules can be utilized whenever there's a declared natural disaster for disaster recovery efforts. That was added as a result of the Hurricane Katrina efforts down in the Gulf area. So, but for those of you who do have a state and local government presence, this is a growing market for GSA. It's a newer capability on the contract, and it has readily gained in momentum. Some of the statistics that we're showing here show that, in total, state and local sales are continuing to increase every year. The IT schedule cooperative purchasing sales are over $143 million last year. So we've talked about what they are and why you should want one. So how do you get a contract in place? If you listen to GSA's marketing group, they may tell you it's as easy as filling out a fast food restaurant application. But for a person who's been leading a group and extensively involved in obtaining contracts for our clients, I can tell you there could be nothing further from the truth. It's an extensive effort. The IT schedule, the 70, the most popular one, the solicitation itself is 184 pages long. So just printing it out takes longer than filling out an application may take. So what's involved? Well, there's some basic criteria. You have, first, some corporate capabilities. For each of the schedules that provides services, there's definitely a requirement for demonstrating your past performance. You have to have a couple of years providing the type of service that you're proposing in that GSA schedule. You have to be able to demonstrate your financial capability and your stability. While this requirement has always been in the acquisition proposal process, it has been highly emphasized in the last 3 years with the downturn in the commercial economy. At this point, you cannot get a GSA schedule contract in place if you do not have access to available funds under a line of credit. So before that was a recommendation to have a line of credit, now it's an actual requirement. You also have to have positive debt-to-equity ratios. They do require multiple years of financial statements. It will undergo a financial analysis at GSA's Kansas City office. These are newer requirements just as a result of the downturn in the economy. GSA wants to ensure that the government contractors who get contracts in place are going to be around next year to be able to provide the services the government needs. For those providing services, you have to have actual project experience that demonstrates that you provided quality service to customers. You also have to provide customer contacts that they can survey for the purposes of providing past performance evaluation. You also, when you get to pricing, have to demonstrate both your commercial and or governmental pricing history. And as a result of that, GSA will be aligning their GSA schedule pricing to an established relationship with some other favored customer or class. So what are some of the required disclosures? Well, one, as you see, it must be important because it's highlighted big and in yellow. You have to be disclosing your commercial sales history for the past 12 months. Now, this is where the word commercial is used very liberally. GSA schedule is negotiated out of the section of the Federal Acquisition Regulations that are related to commercial item acquisition. That's why you don't have to go through the negotiated procurement process each time. It is a market price-based negotiation rather than a cost-based negotiation. So you have to release your prices that others have paid for similar products or services. You have to also disclose any standard or non-standard discounting practices that you may have, and any other terms and conditions or concessions that go along with usually product sales. And if you have any deviations or exceptions to what you normally follow, you have a responsibility for disclosing that anything during that 12-month window. To be able to demonstrate your commercial practices, they're also going to ask you for copies of invoices. For services, they're going to ask you for statements of work from the projects that demonstrate this was like work. If you're talking about products, some of the contracts have requirements like the Trade Agreements Act or the Buy America Act that require for production to be fulfilled in certain countries. For those contracts, you also have to provide the country of origin data for the products. And for all contracts these days, you have to provide 2 years of audited financial statements. Now, they will sometimes go with internal statements if you do not have a requirement otherwise to have audited financial statements. But a lot of times the banks require, when you have a line of credit, that your financial statements are at least audited or reviewed by a CPA firm. So that's why they've changed that to audited, since they're now requiring lines of credit as a financial stability measure. So let's look at the pricing proposal, because it is the most difficult part and the most important part for GSA, since they're negotiating this contract. They are going to be, you'll hear this term, most favored customer, a lot. That's GSA's negotiation objective. They're trying to negotiate a price for the federal government that is better than or equal to your most favored customer. And as a contractor, you need to define what is your most favored customer. For some, it's very obvious. For others, they offer ad hoc pricing based on the individual circumstances, and so defining a most favored customer can become more challenging. You also have to make sure that, notice when I said the objective of GSA is better than or equal to your most favored customer, that doesn't necessarily mean your lowest price, because frequently you may have lower pricing on commercial customers where the terms and conditions are dissimilar to what resides in GSA schedules. And it's important to bring that to the table when you have to disclose those pricings, so that you aren't forced into a negotiation based on differing terms and conditions. You will also hear a lot in the GSA world about the basis of award. And the reason for that is because as a result of the negotiation, there will be an identified most favored customer and a basis of award discount relationship established. For instance, in the example we've given here, they have commercial pricing. They have a standard discount that they offer to their most favored customers of 10% off. GSA, in this case, has negotiated that they will get 5% better than the most favored customer gets. So that's why they're getting a 15% discount. That's a documenting of the negotiation of the contract. What are some of the important factors to remember when you're actually preparing and negotiating a GSA schedule? It's this most favored customer status, not necessarily lowest price. There may be certain circumstances, like if you were providing, if you're providing a commercial customer a minimal discount because they're paying in full in advance of delivery. Well, the federal government GSA scheduled terms are 30 days net. So there's a time value of money that they will allow for that discount. So that's a dissimilar term and condition that GSA should not be entitled to. It's making sure that you understand that you need to fight for that, because GSA will naturally migrate to the lowest price, and it's up to you to defend why they're not eligible for that. It's disclosing your commercial practices. one of the things we're going to talk about in compliance at the end is the reasons, some well-publicized cases where companies have paid millions and millions of dollars as a result of GSA IG audits. Well, the biggest reason why those customers are paying that is they failed to disclose important pricing information that GSA felt they would have negotiated differently if they had have been aware of that information. So what you say is very important. It's better to disclose and explain the deviation than to just not mention it. You also need to make sure that when you're negotiating your prices, especially for services, you may try to negotiate multi-year rates. That's a very common practice in many federal contracts. Many government contractors like to know when they're bidding a 3-year job, that they have rates established for those 3 years already. Right now, I can tell you, if you look at the Department of Labor Employment Cost Index, it's not a very pretty picture. It's generally much lower percentage-wise than what we in the Washington, D.C. area are experiencing in salary escalation. It's about 2.2 to 2.8% right now, which my experience with contractors, they're still giving 3.5 to 4.5% salary increases to keep quality people. It is a challenge. It's particularly made more difficult by the fact that the contracting officer you're negotiating this discount, this escalation with, has received no salary increase in the last 2 years. Makes it a lot harder. You also need to make sure that you are completely aware of your financial capabilities. If your financial statements don't tell the whole story and may cause problems when it gets to the Kansas City Financial Review, you need to make sure that you're prepared to explain any kind of one-time occurrences that may be throwing it off and not providing the whole picture. These are all things to keep in mind that may come up. You have to be prepared to address them as soon as they occur, because the one thing with GSA schedules is it takes a long time to get to the top of the contracting officer's desk, but once you get there, you need to be able to respond within 24 hours. Now I'm going to start giving away some of the secret sauce that we use every day with the clients that we support. Here are 6 ways that you actually may lose money before you ever even get this contract awarded. The first reason is one we've already talked about. It's thinking or letting GSA make you think that you have to give them the lowest price no matter what. There are definitely circumstances where the pricing you offer to someone else that is lower, GSA is not eligible for. You need to understand the reasons why they're not eligible and be able to articulate that. You need to make sure that you are proposing prices that you have established commercial pricing practices for. This frequently comes up in the product world, where you have a product that's coming out of R&D and it's entering the commercial market and you've only had a couple of sales. It's really kind of alpha and beta pricing. You really need to wait to put that product on until after you have established the benchmark commercial price that is going to make money for you in the long term. Generally, the pricing in alpha and beta sales are lower than what it will ultimately need to be, so you need to make sure that you wait until you get that price established. Another reason why people lose money before the contract gets in place is not realizing that they have the ability to negotiate escalated rates for out years. Sometimes, and I will tell you, in the last 2 years, we have chosen not to negotiate multi-year escalation because the employment cost index, which is used as the basis for negotiating that escalation percentage, have not worked in our favor. So we bet that in a year that index was going to go up, and we said we'll ask for an increase next year, betting that the index would go up. And in most cases it has. If you're working on a GSA Schedule Services contract that has the Service Contract Act which is a regulation incorporated into it, you need to understand that's a big red flag. If that is in there, you need to make sure you understand what does that mean and what impact does that have on our pricing of labor in this contract. No contracts in the commercial world have the benefits and the pricing that are going to align with the Service Contract Act pricing. In our experience, any clients we have that sell commercially and then we tell them the Service Contract Act now applies, the pricing generally goes up between 25 and 35% to account for the very healthy benefits that Service Contract Act requires. In the product world, a big mistake that many make is not paying attention to GSA's freight terms. They fail to recognize that the pricing that they are negotiating is maybe FOB destination, and they don't take into account the cost of freight and shipping when they negotiate those rates. And with the ever-increasing price of fuel, freight has also gone up. Freight terms have gone up significantly, and companies that fail to take that into account are really going to continue to pay for that for years to come. Other ways you can lose money after the contract is in place is not understanding what is that basis of award. We talked about that the negotiation is going to result in a discount relationship between your GSA price and some other most favored customer price. Well, you need to make sure you understand what that means. In our experience, all of the years, we've been doing webinars and live events on GSA schedules for more than 12 years, and I frequently ask the question, who understands what their basis of award is? And less than 5% of the audience generally understands what it truly is. That's important to know, so make sure that you document that well after the contract is awarded. Another way to really lose money is not keeping track of price reductions. The second biggest reason why companies end up paying big checks to the federal government during IG audits is because they triggered the price reductions clause, resulting in GSA being offered a lower price, and they failed to notify the government, and it was found during the course of an audit. And the federal government then says, well, how many of these products have you sold going back to the date at which you triggered the price reduction, and send us a check for the refund? That can become significant dollars. So you need to understanding the basis of award will help you to understand how you monitor for price reductions and what's required from a notification to GSA. Number 3 would seem like it's an easy one to do, and by mechanics, it is relatively easy. You're entitled to ask for price increases when you're eligible for them, so you would think that you would. That's a kind of a give me. But the problem is GSA schedules are very flexible, but they don't work like any other contract. Other federal contracts generally negotiate escalations in the very beginning so that you know that the prices are going to go up 3.4% each year. Well, sometimes you can negotiate that into your GSA schedules, but other times you have to come in on an annual basis or whenever you can demonstrate that your commercial prices have gone up. But the problem is there's nothing telling you, there's no bell that goes off saying, it's 1 year, you can now come in and ask your price increase. And GSA is not saying to you, where's your price increase modification? So what frequently happens is 2, 3, sometimes 4 years go by, and we'll hear from a company that's had a GSA schedule in place, and they'll say, we just aren't making as much money as we used to. And all of the reasons why they're not making money was because they were not making modifications to the contract when they were entitled to it that would have continued to maintain their profit margins. So that's entirely within your control. So make sure you understand you're eligible to do it and that you have put it on your calendar to check as a trigger to go off when it's time. There are also negotiated discounts that you may want to put in place. I kind of discourage my clients from putting the prompt payment discount in place, even though GSA may frequently ask for it. It becomes an administrative burden internally for contractors. You have to, like offering, you think it may sound rather innocuous during the course of the negotiation when GSA says, will you give us a 1% discount if we pay within 10 days? And you'll think, sure, the government never pays in 10 days. I won't ever have to honor that discount. But the problem is you have to put that discount 1% 10 days on every bill and invoice that you send out, or if you don't, the government will say, if we had have known, we would have gotten a discount. We would have paid in time to earn it, and therefore you owe us money back. So it becomes a real administrative burden. I highly discourage it. For the product world, the Trade Agreements Act can really especially impact certain areas like information technology and office products. We're going to talk about what countries usually trip people up as it relates to the Trade Agreements Act. And again, as I mentioned, for service companies, that for contracts that are covered by the Service Contract Act, SCA can really trip you up as well. I can't really get into any details about SCA. That's like a 3-day program. But I would encourage you, if you're proposing on a contract that has this act in it, that you avail yourself of what the rules of it are so that you're pricing it appropriately to be able to meet the requirements. But it is important to make sure that any personnel internally that are interacting with the GSA schedule are adequately educated on what the requirements are. Because if you don't, contract compliance becomes a real problem. And as you see, the subtitle is Obey or Pay. That's because there are audits that occur. You're guaranteed that you're going to have these kind of routine contractor assistance visits. Now notice, that's not called an audit. And for anyone who's been through a true IG audit, you know the difference. But if you haven't been through an IG audit, you may feel like this assistance visit is an audit. But in reality, it's performed by a GSA industrial operations analyst that reports to the Administrative Contracting Officer, the ACO. They have no subpoena power. It's usually relatively quick. You aren't given very much notice before they come in. Usually kind of the maximum notice is about 2 weeks. They're generally there for less than half a day. You should probably spend 2 or 3 times that amount of time preparing for their visit. The reason why those visits can be short and quick is if you have prepared for what they're going to be looking at. They are going to be reviewing many compliance areas. They will not be doing testing of transactions, though. That's a big distinction between OIG. It's a review process, and they do some data sampling. They'll provide us with certain GSA task orders, the details of which, and they're going to look through those proposal and contract folders. You generally have about 3 of these visits during any 5-year contract period. Now, some of our clients have them every year routinely, but then others have them generally in the first year, generally in the final year of the contract period, and then one time in between. They're designed to make it so that contractors will be successful in utilizing their contract, but in reality, the biggest reason why these visits take place is because GSA wants to make sure that all of your GSA schedule sales are being reported for the purposes of paying the industrial funding fee that's included in your GSA prices so that GSA gets their money. That's the biggest reason for those types of visits. Alternatively, and very unlikely that many on the call today will actually get or be involved in an Office of Inspector General Audit. They don't do that many of these every year. There are many thousands of GSA schedule contractors. There's probably at maximum 100 OIG audits a year. They tend to be focused on the largest sales within any year on the GSA schedule. Well, if there's $1 billion going through the GSA schedule, the top 10 contractors have some significant sales. So they're going to focus their concentration of their resources in those areas. They do have subpoena power. They're very lengthy. I've been involved in ones that on the short end are 2 weeks, on the long end are 6 months. They do focus predominantly on pricing issues because their objective is to find money, and they almost always do. They do some extensive testing of transactions. It may be pre-award looking forward, and if they find some problems there, they may turn around and make it post-award looking backwards. They're looking for blood. They're looking for mistakes. And the reason why is because there generally are some out there. The biggest reason why checks have to be written, as I mentioned, is price reductions. A company failed to notify GSA that their most favored customer pricing had decreased, and therefore to maintain the basis for award discount relationship, the GSA price needed to decrease. As we see in the example here, they triggered price reductions resulting in a lower GSA price. If you go 18 months and don't realize that and sell a lot of that product, providing that refund can add up very quickly. There are some exceptions when you may offer lower pricing to your MSC and it will not impair your GSA pricing. The biggest reason is if you're selling to someone that's an authorized user of the GSA schedules. For instance, you sell directly as a prime contractor to the federal government, not through your GSA schedule. That's exempt and then from the GSA price reductions clause. They always want you to be able to offer a lower price to the federal government. If you're selling to your MFC in excess of the maximum order threshold of the GSA schedule contract. What is MOT? Each one of the GSA schedules has a dollar value associated with it that says we're negotiating prices up to this dollar threshold. Anything in excess of that dollar threshold, the government is advised to seek additional discounts off of these GSA schedule rates. Now, contractors are not required to offer additional discounts, but frequently they feel compelled to because it's a high-volume order. For instance, on the IT Schedule 70, the maximum order threshold is $500,000. So buying agencies placing orders against the IT schedule over $500,000 are required to ask for additional discounts. Likewise, IT contractors are able to offer additional discounts to their most favored customers over $500,000. That's kind of off the table because it's above the threshold of the GSA schedule. There are also, as I mentioned, if there's some dissimilar terms and conditions that can apply. Prepayments is always a good one. There may also be some, joint marketing considerations where the customer is getting a lower price in exchange for either providing joint marketing efforts, providing marketing stipend or dollars for you. So there's certainly some differing terms and conditions that could create an exception. Now, for the product world, we mentioned the Trade Agreements Act. Definitely a very significant part of the IT schedule and the office product schedule. That's where we tend to see the most angst as it relates to TAA. What this says is, under our trade agreements, the government has negotiated trade agreements. For anything subject to TAA, the products country of origin has to come from a country where we have a trade agreement. These are some of the most commonly non-compliant TAA countries. China. That is the biggest one, especially when you're looking at office products and IT products. But you can't sell products on those GSA schedules that have a country of origin of China or any of these. We've only listed some of the more commonly occurring ones. But that is a big part of product schedules, monitoring to ensure when you're selling a reseller of other manufacturers' products that you understand that at all times the products you're selling are compliant with the Trade Agreements Act. All right, so now there are many resources out there for you. Many are provided by GSA themselves. We have, as for those of you that are already doing market research in this area, you're well familiar with FedBizOps. There are also, I mentioned that there was like a 7-page long list of organizations that were eligible to purchase from GSA schedules. This second one is the link to that list. We also have government web portal, which contains a lot of the data that's being accumulated about government procurement. We also have many of the agency procurement forecasts in this next one. We have the Federal Procurement Data System Next Generation, which is important because one of the things, once you get your GSA schedule in place and you have an industrial operations analyst coming out to do a contractor assistance visit, which is one of those 2 types of audits I described earlier, the person that walks in will have already gone out to this FPDS Next Gen and ran a report saying these are the agencies that have reported that they have placed task orders against your GSA schedule contract. Show me where you have reported the sales for the purposes of paying IFF. Now it's important to make sure that before that analyst arrives at your door that you have also run this report and you are aware of what's been reported by agencies. There are common mistakes made in reporting of contracts. We frequently have to work with clients to get FPDS corrected because they improperly coded something as being a GSA schedule sale that was obviously not. It's easier to do that before the analyst arrives than it is to do it after the analyst has included it in their report. The last one on here is the listing of the current NAICS codes. Highly important these days for especially the Sector 54, which are many of the professional services, including IT services and management consulting and financial, because there were some very recent changes in the month of February where the SBA has gone through and done an analysis of sales and revenues and determined that there are new and in most cases higher small business size standard revenue thresholds. So for any, especially like the MOBIS contract, the management consulting schedule, which was previously in the $7 million range, is now going to move to $14 million. So there are a lot of companies that were small businesses that grew to large businesses that will now, as a result of these increases, will now go back to being a small business. And there are definitely some advantages to that. We also have, very important, Aronson's blog. We've had a government contracting industry blog in place for more than 4 years, and we are always monitoring the news in the industry for what's important to our government contract industry, and we're putting it up on our blog. We probably are posting 4 or 5 times a week, and it's a lot of great information on a wide variety of topics of interest to government contractors. There's also a lot of information that GSA publishes about the GSA schedules that are listed here. If you're doing market research to find out which of your competitors are on GSA schedule, or if you want to know what GSA schedule may be applicable to the products or services that you offer. Both the GSA Schedules eLibrary and GSA Advantage are good sites for doing that research. We mentioned very early on that GSA has some e-procurement tools available to ordering agencies. That is eBuy. It's actually an interactive RFQ tool that can be used for agencies that are going to be placing orders through GSA Schedules. It's an entirely online process that is only accessible by the companies who have those particular contracts in place. It's not visible by anyone else. We also have a lot of information for existing GSA schedule holders at the Vendor Support Center. This is where, for those of you who already have GSA schedules, you're familiar with the mass modifications that are coming all too frequently these days. That's where you're going to see your mass mods that are available and required for you to act on. We also have, OSABU, and we have SBA listed here as well, especially if you're looking at trying to find out whether your NAICS code was one of the ones changed recently. I would highly encourage you to look that up. Of course, we have listed that on the Aronson blog as well. So I think I'm going to turn it back over to Steve and Gloria.
Fabulous. I always learn new information every time I hear you, Hope. And we have many questions coming in related to this extraordinary base of information. Steve, would you like to start us off with those questions?
Yeah, you bet. First question, Hope, that I have is, my company only sells to the federal government, and we don't have commercial customers. Can we get a GSA schedule contract?
Well, that's a great question, and I can tell you it's really confusing. The term commercial is used ambiguously and widely in the GSA schedules area. If you have the pure reading of the GSA schedule solicitation, it would appear that you have to have what we would call true commercial customers in order to get a GSA schedule contract in place. But I can tell you from practical experience that couldn't be further from the truth. Probably about half of our clients that we have gotten on GSA schedule over the years only sold into the federal government marketplace. So in that case, they would have considered that they had no commercial sales. But one of the different things about GSA schedule, the GSA, is they consider when you are a subcontractor to a prime contractor with a federal end user, they consider that to be a commercial sale. So that's one way you can essentially establish commercial pricing even though you're only selling to the federal government end user. Also, you can, if you have time and material contracts as a prime contract with the federal government, you can also frequently use that pricing to establish your pricing, and by saying that it's available in the commercial marketplace. It isn't modified specifically to government specifications, and so therefore the fact that federal buyers have gone through a negotiated procurement process and deemed your pricing fair and reasonable, that has established the commerciality of it. So on the first blush reading GSA schedules, you would think you have to have commercial pricing, but really more importantly, you have to have established pricing that you can demonstrate, whether it's a commercial prime customer, a subcontractor to a prime federal government end user, or true C2C pricing.
Okay. Another question. If GSA schedules aren't subject to negotiated buy-in rules, do contracting officers just send you orders?
Well, we all wish it was that easy. and they don't have to. As we talked about the advantages to government buyers and why they use it, it is a more expedited process. But there are still some rules in place. and those rules are actually getting a little more stringent every day. As a matter of fact, just last week, the federal government has finalized a rule that says that if a federal buyer is going to be utilizing a GSA schedule contract and they're buying in excess of the simplified acquisition threshold, which is currently $150,000, then they have to actually notify all contractors that hold the GSA schedule that they're buying against, or they have to notify a sufficient number of contractors in order to get 3 quotes back. That's a new change. For products, it's relatively easy. If it's under the micro purchase threshold of $3,000 for products or services, they can purchase from anybody that they want to. If it's for products over $3,000, they have to go out and do market research using GSA Advantage and make a best value determination. If it is for services over the micro purchase threshold, they have to issue a performance-based scope of work to now a sufficient number of contractors to get 3 bids back, or they have to otherwise document how they satisfied competition. As a result of this brand new rule, we're going to see a lot more activity and procurement opportunities going through GSA's eBuy tool, because on the eBuy tool, the contracting officer can post the opportunity in 3 different ways. They can post it so that everyone that has the applicable special item number on their GSA schedule gets an email notifying them about the opportunity and telling them the details and allowing them to bid on it. They can post it in such a way that they can select the contractors, and only those selected contractors will get the notice by email. Or, and this is the most frequently used, they can post it blindly so that no one gets an email, but anyone who has the applicable SIN and logs into eBuy will see the opportunity. That is going to be the loophole that contracting officers use to satisfy this new requirement. They're going to say, even though they got 1 or 2 bids, they posted it blindly, allowing every schedule holder that was eligible the opportunity to bid, and even if only 2 of them responded, that satisfies this competition requirement. So, no, it's not as easy as just getting an order faxed in or emailed to you, but it certainly can be a much more limited competition and a shorter time period and a much more limited proposal response required.
I have another question.
I think we might actually only be able to take one more question.
One more question, Gloria?
Yes.
Okay. When GSA comes to audit, they ask to see non-GSA federal contracts. Why is that?
Well, the biggest reason why they're asking for non-GSA federal contracts, because normally you might think, well, why are they asking for that? That's not within their purview. The reason why is they're trying to find out if you failed to disclose a federal sale as a GSA schedule sale when it should have been. Again, this is part of GSA trying to ensure that anything that was awarded subject to their negotiation and their prices on their contract, they're getting credit for, and they're getting their industrial funding fee. So that's why they're asking for that information.
Okay.
Well, this was an extraordinary wealth of information. We have other questions that have come in, but we're just about out of time. And before we go, we want Steve to tell us what's happening at the Fort Detrick Business Development Office. So everyone who has sent in your questions, we will respond to you individually. And remember, if you're listening to this as a recording, still send your questions in to ask@fdbdo.com, and Steve will make sure that you get a personal answer. So, Steve, you want to thank Hope and then tell us what's happening at the FD.
Yeah, thank you very much, Hope, for making this webinar on GSA risks and rewards possible for us today. And I just want to mention that this webinar, in addition to other webinars we've done in the past, are posted to our website, and it will be there indefinitely and free for everyone to listen to going forward. We conduct about one webinar a month. So please stay tuned and check out our website to see what's coming up on the schedule at our website, www.fdbdo.com. And register with our office. If you're interested in finding and working with solicitations that match up with your capabilities, with your business, register with our office. We're free so that you have access to these opportunities in a timely basis. And we're here for consulting and giving you direction on how to work with Fort Detrick. So our website, again, www.fdbdo.com, or call me 301-620-7071. All right. Thank you, Gloria.
Absolutely. Hope, I also want to thank you for your time and expertise in talking about the wonderful world of GSA schedules. It's good to hear that we are going to see even more sales and businesses will see more revenues based on GSA schedules. Thank you for your time today, Hope.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
And you have the contact information up on the screen right now for Hope Lane at Aronson LLC, Steve Lamberson at the FD-BDO, and me, Gloria Larkin, at Target Gov. We're here to help you be as successful as possible in the federal government marketplace. Make sure you do sign up, not just for the Fort Detrick Business Development client services, but also for their newsletters. They are full of fabulous information to help you be more successful in the government contracting market. And I'm going to just give you a testimonial for the Aronson blog. If you want to stay on top of what's happening, and so many things are changing, sometimes even daily, the Aronson blog is a very good way for you to get that information on a very timely basis. So it's now time for us to say goodbye and sign off. Thank you for participating in our webinar, and we'll look forward to having you participate in the upcoming ones as well. Thank you, everyone.